All right, recording has started. Recently for the crossover with Josh that we post to the Card Letter YouTube channel, I we finally have become a YouTube platform, and as a result, I have these headphones now and this microphone set up in the office. And all of a sudden, as I'm doing my Card Letter work, I have podcasts on in the background, and I started getting some ideas, and I bother my friends, including Josh, quite a bit with my thoughts and opinions on basketball. Certainly to the point where they're like, "Yeah, okay, that's cool, dude," or maybe they disagree or whatever. But now that I have this setup suddenly in my office, I have the ability to jot down some notes, maybe take a quick walk and go over some thoughts, and then push record and see what happens. So I don't know if I'll do a ton of these or not, but I was inspired today. NBA playoff basketball gets me excited. So here's what we're going to do. I don't have a real name for this. I'm just going to call it the Chris HOJ-cast, episode number 1 for now. And we'll come up with a better name later. But what I want to talk about today is something that will not come as a surprise to the folks who know me. I want to talk about this guy, Nikola Jokic. I think we've seen him do some variation of that shrug before, but it's no secret that I'm a big Nikola Jokic collector. Christine and I have become big Nuggets fans. Started building the collection in late 2021, and really just have been having a blast doing it ever since. So I want to talk about things that I've observed, and I think I've stumbled into something that I haven't heard any of the podcasts talk about. I've been through a few of them so far today. I listened to Simmons and Ursillo go over the game. I listened to the Nuggets Inc. podcast. I've listened to a few podcasts talk about this game so far. And I just have some thoughts to add, not just about the game 4 that happened, I guess yesterday now, Sunday, May 11th, but also just Jokic in these playoffs. It's been a very weird playoffs. It's definitely been on some level disappointing playoffs. On some level, there's a very interesting revelation that I want to foreshadow that I'm going to get to later on in this podcast. So stick around if you want to hear something new and interesting. And if you're a fan of Jokic and a fan of the Nuggets, I think you'll take some heart from it. And if you're not, you're going to hate it, and that's completely fine. I totally welcome people to disagree, and I look forward to learning things from people who can teach me something. So here is where I want to start. I really want to start. Why did I have ChatGPT make this image of Jokic looking confused? And it's because I'm confused. We're all confused. We want to find out what is going on with Nikola Jokic in these playoffs. So I do what I'm going to do, what I like to do, which is go to metrics, go to all-in-one metrics, go to the 3 rate-based all-in-one metrics that Basketball Reference offers. Those are box plus minus, win shares per 48, and player efficiency rating, PER. They have their strengths, they have their weaknesses, they really measure different things, they have different methodologies. Don't need to go into all of them now. There will be one day maybe a video going into all these different methodologies, but we're not going to go into them at very much length at all right now. We are going to use them as the baseline. So we are going to use them to say, we're using the same formula, these 3 different formulas, and we're just seeing how it has changed over time. And we can see right here, as I've pulled up on Jokic's basketball reference page, his box plus minus in the playoffs this year is 9.1. It's not bold. Bold means league leader. He was the league leader in this category for the last 2 years. It's not bold now, obviously. And you can see that these 2 columns break it up into offensive and defensive box plus minus. His offensive is where the slippage is, not in the defensive, and that's going to be a talking point. By the way, these numbers have not updated yet, so these numbers don't include Sunday's game. So these are numbers that reflect the first 10 games of the playoffs, not the 11th game, which was game 4 of the Oklahoma City series. That's not in here yet. His win shares per 48 is plus 132. So that's the lowest of his career. His BPM plus 9.1 is the 3rd lowest of his career, but it's close. And then his player efficiency rating is a 23.2, which is the lowest of his career also. So he led the league in player efficiency rating for the 3 prior years, win shares per 48, and BPM for the 2 prior years. So there's clearly slippage going on here. That's what I'm saying. He is not generating the success in the all-in-one metrics that he had in the previous playoffs. And then let's look at it compared to the rest of the league. So in these playoffs, the leader in BPM is Giannis with a BPM of plus 11.4, which is a very good BPM, not historic or anything, but it's good. Also remember that he only played 5 games. Second is LeBron. He also only played 5 games, but plus 9.5 for LeBron is just phenomenal. That is just extremely impressive. that right now he's going to go down as having the second best box plus minus for these playoffs, doing it at his age and with some of the injuries that he was battling through, and doing it with a lesser offensive load and contributing more in other ways. Then we have Jokic in third. So he's third in box plus minus, which you're going to say that's fine. I mean, the standard for him is to be first in this metric, but third, okay, that's, what are we getting all concerned about? But it's the win shares per 48 of it all where it starts to get a little bit more concerning. So I need to scroll over to the left here to see what his exact rank in win shares per 48 is. Okay, it's 40th. So he's 40th in win shares per 48. And let me just see what he is in PR. And he's 7th in PER. So when we start stacking up that way, the average of those three metrics is just not his standard. He usually leads. Last few years, he's led in all three of them. Okay, so we have established that there is some slippage here going on with Jokic. And so, we can kind of run through very quickly what happened in the Clippers series. So, the Clippers series, we had a series of close games. One went to Denver, one went to the Clippers. Jokic somewhere in the mix of these first four games, I think he had like a 30, 20 and 10 game roughly, or something roughly like that. So he had some nice games, but by the end of this series, he was having some real slippage in his shot, and just quite frankly, in Game 7, the team carried him. But overall, it was a series where it just was. It was a bit subpar per the all-in-ones. And then the slippage continues going into Oklahoma City series. Now, Jokic put up like this 42-22-6 game or something like that in Game 1, which was a great statistical game, and it impacted or corresponded with a win. But this is where we're going to get to the heart of this video and the heart of what I want to talk about in this video. The slippage started happening again in this series in particular. And so in Game 2, there was the blowout. Now, in Game 2, I actually, upon watching that game, I felt like Denver's process was pretty good. I know that they lost by 43 points. I know they gave up the most points, I think, in NBA playoff history in a half in the first half. But I thought that they were okay in that game from a process point of view. So in that game, they missed a lot of shots at the rim. There was a lot of physicality. It was allowed. It was Scott Foster's first game back officiating, and I think over 2 months or something like that. So, there was maybe some issues with the team being able to score at the rim. And in fact, when I looked at the expected points metric that gets published on the NBA Game Report Twitter account, what that account showed was that the expected points score for that game was OKC 128, Denver 120. So again, Oklahoma City wins on the expected points. I think they won the expected points battle for 3 of the 4 games that have had it published so far. So they won on the expected points, but only by 8. And the biggest gap, the biggest reason why Denver came up so short of its 120 expected points was points at the rim. So they shot something like 2 of 12 at the rim or something like that. They were 13.5 points shy of what their expected point total was going to be at the rim. So, you can kind of look and say, well, there's a lot of physicality a lot of that game, or you can just say Denver didn't finish well at the rim. Whatever the case may be, they went way under expectation in that game. And from a process point of view, the game was probably quite a bit closer than the score indicated. But this game was a Jokic slippage game. Jokic, if I remember correctly, got 3 quick fouls in the third quarter, and then he fouled out. Were those frustration fouls? Were they ticky-tack fouls? Where, the game was the likelihood of Denver winning that game was already very minute at that point. I think it was like a 40-point spread or so in the third quarter. So I just want to point out that game, maybe for a multitude of reasons, was the first game in this series where Jokic really showed some slippage. He was 16 points and like 6 rebounds and 6 assists or something like that, and a handful of turnovers or maybe even more. It was just not an impressive game, and he was like a minus 30 or something in that game. Okay, then we get to Game 3, which was a phenomenal game. I watched that game with my brother, my dad, and Christina, and I remember watching that game and thinking, at halftime when the Nuggets were only down 5, I remember saying, this is probably the worst I've ever watched Jokic play. And for them to only be down 5, for other guys to be stepping up the way that they were, Murray and MPJ and Gordon and Brown and Westbrook even, and Watson, and everybody contributing to this game, it was almost like there's some recipe here for these guys to win with Jokic playing poorly. They won the non-Jokic minutes in that game, I'm pretty sure. And that was a game where went to OT. Jokic shot 0 of 10 from 3, which is just unbelievably bad. It really almost was 0 for 11. The final shot of regulation was a Jokic long shot. It looked like a 3, but really, I guess the toe was on the line, so it was a 2. It didn't matter. It didn't go in anyway, but that saved him from the humiliation of 0 and 11 and just kept him at 0 for 10. And then in overtime, Jokic was very good. He scored 4 points. He was 2 for 2. He had an assist. He scored more points than Oklahoma City's whole team did in overtime. He came alive in overtime, but it was a really weird game for Jokic. But something that I did notice when I was looking at that game was his defensive impact seemed to be pretty good. Is there something there defensively? And then that brings me to the main point, the thing that I foreshadowed at the beginning, the reason why I made this video, the thing that I haven't heard anybody discuss, but that I have clear evidence of that I'm going to show you, which is I've observed that there's been a strategic shift in the way that Jokic is playing in this series. So we recap sort of how he had this really productive statistically box score wise game 1, and then just a real big drop off in game 2, and then a pitiful offensive performance in game 3. And I think that coincides with the Oklahoma City increasingly ratcheting up its defensive efforts on just completely taking him out of the game in a number of ways. Number one, by packing the paint, by everybody having a foot in the paint, just really making it difficult for him to do anything inside the paint, to play make in the paint, to shoot in the paint, to do anything. If he tries to do anything, it's going to be contested. There's going to be arms. He's struggled to make interior passes in the paint. The whole team has struggled to. They are really effectively taking away the paint, which is, I think part of the reason why they won game 3 was because they were so committed to that it freed up other players to do things around the perimeter, and they did for Denver successfully in that game. Okay, so they're packing the paint. Number 2, I've noticed increasingly, anytime Jokic gets the ball, there is at least one defender coming from wherever his blind spot is, trying to get that steal. Now, this is not totally unique to Oklahoma City. I see a lot of teams do this, but the frequency and the intensity with which Oklahoma City does it, they are completely selling out to do it. But they play such good defense. They do such nice, quick recoveries to the guy who's cheating. If Jokic somehow finds where he came from, their ability to recover with a help defender to make up for the fact that this guy's left open for a second, or sometimes it's certain shooters that they're just leaving open too. It's been really effective defense. So then they've been able to get some steals. I mean, in one of these games, he had like 8 turnovers. I think it was game 3 where he had 8 turnovers, and he also went 0 for 10 from 3. So, they really have stifled everything that he likes to do offensively. Now, it does come at a cost. The game where he had such a poor offensive performance, you got these really solid performances from a lot of the other players on the team, which is a trade-off that Oklahoma City has to make. But going into game 4, Oklahoma City did not change strategy. I think they even ratcheted it up further. Like anytime Jokic is touching the ball, there's guys coming from the blind spot coming to steal it. They're completely packing the paint. They're taking away the ability to do interior passing. They're also really good at sitting in passing lanes, anticipating his cross-court skip passes and stuff like that. So they've done a nice job of taking away his offense. I think what I've noticed is I think Jokic and Adelman and the coaching staff and the team probably too, I think everybody has noticed this, that Oklahoma City has this effective ability, and because they're throwing so many resources at it, but also because they're just very good, they're able to take away a lot of the offensive playmaking and scoring that Jokic does. They're able to take a lot of it away. So the adjustment, and this adjustment probably came from Jokic, the adjustment has been Jokic is tilting his energy away from being heavily offensive oriented to more of a split, or even leaning defensively oriented. And that's a big deal. Usually team's best offensive player is going to contribute much. They're going to exert much of their energy as much as possible. They're going to put it into offense because it's much more difficult for a team to generate high quality offense than it is for a team to play connected team defense. So, if you have a guy, the way that the equation sort of balances is that a guy can put a ton of energy into offense and then he can sort of hide on defense. And so if you have a player who has a finite amount of energy, which they all do, if they're a great offensive player, you want them putting all that energy into offense and then hiding on defense if possible. This is what all the great offensive players in the league do. And this is also why strategically the opposing team will try to attack the best offensive player, even if they're a good defender, whether they are or not. They will try to attack that player as often as possible so that they can deplete them of their energy. So they make them really work on defense, because the theory is that hopefully they won't be able to bring that energy to the offensive end too. So I think there was a philosophical change here that was implemented with Jokic in particular, tilting more towards putting energy into the defensive end and saying, look, we have other guys who can step up. If they're going to be selling out to stop Jokic, let's try and make Jokic into as much of a decoy as we can. We still have to make him honor it. And Jokic, if they're going to give you the perimeter three, heave it, even if you're 0 for 10 or whatever you are. I think he was 2 for 8 in game 4. That's not particularly great either. He hasn't been shooting well. He's been missing free throws, but he's almost in more of a decoy role on offense right now. And he's using a lot more of his energy on defense. And so what has been the result? And this is the startling finding. This is actually an amazing finding here. So if I go over to ESPNanalytics.com, they have a metric that they introduced this year, which was designed by Dean Oliver, who's one of the forefathers of the basketball analytics movement. He was the creator of some of the basic tools that we use, like offensive rating, defensive rating, and the 4 factors, 20, 25 years ago. And now he's out with an all-in-one metric. He came out with this metric this year. He took a job at the ESPN Analytics. ESPN publishes this stat. He also has a book out that sort of corresponds with it. It doesn't really get into the methodology. My understanding is that it doesn't really break it down too much. He wanted to protect, the proprietary nature of this metric and stuff. But basically the metric is, methodologically, it's weighting box score, play-by-play, and tracking data when available. It's weighting it based on how these similar statistics racked up in similar environments correlated with regularized adjusted plus minus samples over big samples. I mean, this is basically the methodology behind box plus minus. And, a lot of the statistical plus minus stuff like tries to find the perfect correlation between the role that the player's playing and the statistics that they're producing and how that lines up with regularized adjusted plus minus stuff over a big sample. So it's using a pretty reliable methodology, my understanding is, but there's some differences, bringing in the play-by-play and the tracking. If that, that's allegedly what's going on here, that can be really helpful too. We don't need to go into the methodology here, although like basketball fans will love it. I think maybe we'll talk about that sometime when time it permits. But anyway, it's a credible stat put out by a credible person. And I love looking at it after every game. They publish this advanced box score after every game. And so what I noticed when I looked at this particular box score for Denver is that Jokic's D-net, his defensive net points, was plus 7.8 for the game. I know that's really small on the screen. It was plus 7.8 for the game. That was a game high for both teams. So Chet Holmgren had a plus 5.3. Hardenstein had a plus 4.7. Jokic had a plus 7.8. And so to give some context to that, I was sort of wondering, how good of a defensive net points score is this? Like, it was a game high, but some other guys had some pretty high ones too. So this stat at this time only lets you look at a daily summary. So like it will tell you for the day who the best defensive net points leader was. And I looked at every day in the playoffs, and Jokic's plus 7.8 is the best defensive net points score in the entire playoffs for any individual player. That's unbelievable. And like, so if you're thinking like, what are the raw numbers to sort of line up with this? Well, it was 4 steals, it was 0 blocks. He was a +1 today when some of the other starters were in the negatives. I don't know. I don't know the full methodology here. I do know that they're looking at all this stuff, and they're using correlations with historical data sets to kind of figure out the goal of this metric, which I think, I don't know, maybe there's a better explainer on a different page, but basically the idea is it's dividing, it's taking the point differential in the game and it's figuring out who is responsible for what. And so Jokic on defense was a plus 7.8. And in the prior game, he was around like a +5, which is a really high score too, but it wasn't the best in the playoffs. I didn't go back and do the regular season game by game in the regular season. I'm somebody must have had a higher than a plus 7.8. But to have the best defensive performance per net points in the playoffs is, I think, a compelling piece of evidence pointing towards Jokic's energy and philosophical shift to the defensive end. And it makes sense. If Oklahoma City is able to take away all these different offensive things that he would normally pour a lot of energy into, and the teammates are stepping up, Aaron Gordon, Jamal Murray, these other guys, when they're all stepping up and they're able to win games even when he's horrible. Well, what if we just took away some of that offense? What if he wasn't, over 10? Like, what if we let some other guys get some of those shots in there, and he's more of a decoy and he's more putting his effort into the defensive end? And so then you have to think, like, well, what has been the team-wide result of these defensive efforts? And so I would look particularly, because I think this shift has been happening, this adjustment has been happening over the course of the series, particularly after Oklahoma City had 149 points. So OKC went from two very high scoring games, one incredibly high scoring game, to then 104 in overtime, 102 in regulation, and then all the way down to 92. Now, part of that going down to 92, obviously, you could argue is fatigue. But I think that the big shift in production and scoring production is a philosophical shift that's happened at the Jokic tip of the spear. And Jamal Murray, by the way, has been playing excellent defense, particularly in game 3. His defense was really good. So I think there's been this philosophical shift. And so here's how we contextualize this. So during the regular season, Oklahoma City had the third best offensive rating. It was around like 119 or 120. Denver had the fourth. So Oklahoma City was a slightly better, on a team level, they had a slightly better offensive rating than Denver. Oklahoma City defensive rating was the best in the league comfortably, a big gap between them and the second best team. That gap led to analysts saying that relative to competition, Oklahoma City's defense was one of the best defenses of all time. Denver's defense was below average. I think defensive rating wise, they were like 20th this year. Okay. So you're talking about Denver, a below average defense, top 4 offense. Oklahoma City, number 1 defense, top 3 offense. Yet, over these last 2 games, the output offensively from both teams has been similar. So how did Denver raise from being a below average defense to containing Oklahoma City, who was a top 3 offense, and doing just as good of a job containing them as Oklahoma City's number 1 all-time great defense is doing containing Denver's top 4 offense? So that's remarkable. I don't hear really much. I mean, there's been like some mention in passing about Denver's defense, but and there's definitely some shot variance stuff going on here on both sides. And shot quality data does indicate that Oklahoma City is generating better shots, at least like through the first 3 games, they've been generating higher quality shots than Denver. But also the result is the result. The result of these games is that these defenses are both holding very good offenses to very low outputs. And that was not the case in the first 2 games. So, I think there's something noteworthy here. And so if you look watch Denver's trajectory. In game 1, they scored 121 in regulation. In game 2, 106. In game 3, they scored 113 with overtime, but they had 102 in regulation. And then in game 4, 87. So Denver is decreasing. They dropped off by 15. They dropped off by 4. And then they dropped off by 15 again. So Denver's offense is just wilting. It's stepping back. It's slowing down. It's scoring less. Oklahoma City's offense went from very good to incredible, 149, then just dropping off a cliff. Just absolutely drop the net swing, a 45-point offensive output swing, really 47 to regulation, and then all the way down to 92. Outside of a game 7, I think it would be very hard to have convinced somebody coming into the series that Denver would have been able to hold Oklahoma City to 8 points below 100, even if the game, I don't know what the pace is. I don't know what the actual rating was for the game. I know, the pace is probably slow. It's probably a higher offensive rating than 92 in the game, but the trend here, the shift in focus, I think it starts with Jokic, and it starts with him shifting his attention to defense and putting up a plus 7.8 defensive net point score. The best in the playoffs. That is really shocking. And it's a testament to, I think, what a unique, special player the Jokic is, that, he can sort of shift from being the best offensive player in the world to a very good, amazing defensive performance when a game calls for it. So I just found that to be noteworthy, discussion worthy. But it also puts us at a really weird place in this series. That's why I bring back up the Jokic confused guy, because here's the deal. So as I was getting ready to go over my Nuggets podcast for the night, and look, I really admire these podcast creators, these content creators, and I don't want this to be a criticism of them. I just want this to be a disagreement, and it would upset me. I would not be happy if they felt like I wasn't enjoying their content or I was being unfair or hypercritical of them or something. So I want to say I really enjoy these guys' content, but I have a disagreement with them on something. And the disagreement is, Nuggets Inc., their headline for their podcast today after Game 4, Nikola Jokic's struggles. Pickaxe and Roll, the episode title is Nikola Jokic's slump continues. And then we get to the DNVR, Denver Nuggets podcast, Jokic struggles again. So these are three of my go-tos. And the lead story is Jokic is struggling. And it is true. Offensively, he is struggling. And on the whole, the playoffs, the all-in-one metrics say that he is struggling, except for the defensive box plus minus metric, which was consistent with his peak seasons. But the offensive part is what's wilted and what has declined so far in these playoffs. I think that number will get a little bump after Game 4's numbers come in, because he was okay offensively in Game 4. Let's see his numbers in Game 4. He was 7 of 22 shooting, which is obviously inefficient and not very good. But he was 11 of 14 from the free throw line. That the all-in-ones typically like good free throw shooting. 3 assists. That's nothing special. But he ended up with 27 points, which was at a game high. Yeah, I think that was a game high. SGA had the second most points at 25. So, I think his all-in-ones are probably going to like the performance that he had today. Maybe a slight bump from that performance. But this is what was just boggling my mind, was that, look, it's not as simple as just it's a slump or it's a struggle. And it's really not. It's not even that. It's that there has been a shift in what his energy is being applied towards. And it's sort of it's a chess move. It's like it's giving the opponent this sacrificing offense. It's like a queen sacrifice. It's sacrificing the offense, the all the moves and things that can be done on offense, but taking it back on defense and putting up these masterful defensive performances. So the thing about it is that Jokic gets just annihilated for his defense. That's one of the main narratives that the talking heads on TV go with. That's one of the narratives that the local coverage goes with. They just love to beat him up for his defense, justifiably so. I don't think. I think his energy given is almost always so focused on offense and not so much on defense. And also there are physical limitations that he has defensively, obviously, too, particularly as a rim protector. But the point here is that when he did turn it up defensively, and it's not just like, oh, he was, an above average defender and I want people to give him credit for that. No, he put up the best defensive net points performance of the playoffs. That is not slumping or struggling. Offensively, slumping or struggling, or even going into a bit of a decoy mode, yes. But that's only half the story in context of what has been happening in his performance in this series, as the series has worn on, as defense has become much, much more of Denver's identity suddenly in this series, to the point where they're almost holding Oklahoma City to half as many points in Game 4 as they allowed in Game 2. So wanted to make those observations. And then how much of a struggle is it really? So relative to the league. So let me bring up StatMuse here. And let me just see here, in the 2024-2025 NBA playoffs, which player has the worst? We'll start with field goal percentage, because this is the metric that is most commonly used, and we'll set a minimum of 100 field goal attempts. And let's see how poorly Jokic is doing. So with a minimum of 100 field goal attempts, this data is going to include, because StatMuse updates right away after the games. So Tatum has the worst field goal percentage, 39.5. OG Anunoby, Russell Westbrook, Jalen Brunson. Those are your 4 worst field goal percentages on people who have attempted at least 100 attempts in the playoffs this year. Then you have Cade, then you have Edwards, then you have Banchero, you have James Harden, you have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's the 9th worst. Jaylen Brown is the 10th worst. Buddy Hield, Mikal Bridges is the 12th worst at 44%. Franz Wagner, Jimmy Butler, Tyrese Halliburton. That's the bottom 15. Then you get Alperen Şengün, Luka Doncic at 45.2%. Then you get to CB at 45.4%. Jokic is the 19th worst field goal percentage among people who've taken at least 100 shots, which is, I don't know how many total that is, but it's probably not a ton. But he's the 19th worst, and Jamal Murray is right there with him at 45.7. Okay, so field goal percentage wise, and then Curry's 25th worst, if that can help you calibrate or set a baseline. Donovan Mitchell is 22nd worst. Okay, so field goal percentage wise, like, there's still a chasm between, even with the awful shooting that he's had over the last 3 games, there's still a chasm. And then let's do true shooting percentage. For those who would appreciate what that is, it takes into consideration the value of a shot, and it understands that making a 3-point shot is more valuable than making a 2-point shot. So then we get Şengün with the worst true shooting percentage, Cade Cunningham 2nd worst, Franz Wagner 3rd worst, Mikal Bridges 4th worst, Banchero 5th worst. We round out the top 10 with Russ, OG, CB, Jalen Brunson, and Anthony Edwards is 10th worst. Jokic has the 14th worst true shooting percentage among players who've taken at least 100 shots in the playoffs. Right there, sandwiched in between Jalen Williams and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and surrounded by, Tatum is 12th worst, Halliburton is 16th worst. So, I just want to push back just a little bit on the idea that it's a slump. It's not as simple as that. And that, even with the poor offensive performance, like shooting 7 of 22 today, I think it was 8 of 25 in game 3, even with those poor performances, he won his minutes in both of those scenarios. He was a +5 in game 3, and he was a +1 in game 4. In game 4 in particular, he played 43 minutes, and he was a +1. That means in the 5 minutes that he was off the floor, the team lost those minutes by 6 points. So understanding that some of this, first of all, understanding that the Nuggets in these playoffs have been better than usual with Jokic off relative to other playoffs on a game by game basis. Like in Game 7 against the Clippers, it was non-Jokic minutes that were essential to them winning that game. Same thing for Game 3. Jokic, I believe, had the worst plus minus, even though it was positive. He had the worst plus minus of any of the starters in Game 3. But in Game 4, he had a +1. We had other starters, co-stars like -12s and stuff like that. So he won his minutes. His 43 minutes he won. That was only by +1. He won it by the smallest margin he possibly could. But, the guy went up against the 68-win team, played for 43 minutes against them, and he won his minutes. And when he's sitting on the bench, he can't win those minutes. I mean, I don't know, maybe you could say he should coach harder, he should inspire the team more, or you can also say that he should win his minutes by more. And, there's varying degrees of merit to all those different points. But there's also merit to the simple observation that he also won his minutes. And if the game was just the 43 minutes that he played, the Denver Nuggets win that game. So, all right, final thoughts here as we wrap this thing up. We're already over 33 minutes. So final thoughts here. What should we expect for the final 3 games of this series? So Game 5 is going to be Tuesday at 9:30 Eastern. Game 6 is Thursday, TBD on the time. And then Game 7, if necessary, is Sunday. So going into Game 7, they get an extra day off. Otherwise, it's 1 day off in between the games and the traveling back and forth. I don't think that the rest issue is as big of an issue for Denver. They were very good. I think they were undefeated on back-to-backs this year. And I just think they get into a rhythm. I know Jokic has made comments before along the lines of they don't like taking games off. I think that if the trend holds and if Denver has sort of made this philosophical switch to being more defensive oriented and having their best player put more energy towards defense, then I think we're going to see more games like what Game 3 and Game 4 looked like. Grind sessions. I also think it's possible that Oklahoma City just gets hot from deep for a game, or you get a brutal whistle in a game, and all of a sudden Denver can't do anything on the interior without getting fouled, but not called. But my prediction is that we're going to see more grinded out games. Last year, also in the second round, the 1 seed Oklahoma City Thunder pulled to a 2-2 tie with Dallas going into final 3 games, and Oklahoma City had home court advantage for those final 3 also as the 1 seed. And then Dallas won out. They won the final 2. And I was there. I was there for game 6 in Dallas. I was there when Shai Gilgeous-Alexander fouled PJ Washington on a 3-point attempt, which led to the free throws that iced the game. So, I think it's going to be close. I think that the final 2 games, I remember the last game of the Dallas series last year was close. I think it's going to be tough, but also I think there's a chance that Jokic is going to be playing a lot more around the perimeter. I think that's part of the philosophical shift here is like, let's stop wasting so much energy when we're just getting killed when we try to get you the ball into the spots where you can play make, and you're just getting attacked from all these sides and we don't have anything opening up. We don't have any interior passing open up, and it's just not, we can create shots in different ways. And so I think though, if they play off of them on the perimeter, or if they play a lot of ISO one-on-one, if they sort of have a philosophical shift and sort of let Hardenstein kind of do the one-on-one thing, and they, I think either team could get hot. I think either team could get hot from shooting. So, I don't know. I think as this series has slowed down and turned into this grinded out battle, I think that benefits Denver. I think Oklahoma City would prefer to have a really fast transition, 130 point game. I think, where they have an opportunity to get hot and go on a streak and pull away. I think Denver benefits when the game slows down and comes into these sort of half court, crunch grind sessions. I think that benefits them, especially if they can get into these close game situations at the end where, game 1 and game 3, those are Denver's 2 wins and they both came from behind. The situation where I worry the most is when Denver had a lead in the fourth quarter like they did today. Like Denver gets up 7-10 points or something like that. They love to get comfortable. They love to blow leads like that. If Denver's going to have a lead in the fourth quarter, it needs to be like a 22-point lead like they had in that game when the Clippers came all the way back on the game that ended with the Aaron Gordon dunk. So, okay. I am going to terminate this podcast now, but I think my prediction is going to be, as I sort of talked through it, I think it's going to be 3 more grinded out games. I do think this is going to go 7, and I think that tends to benefit Denver. I think they will. I hope. Let's not even say I think. Let's just say I hope, because that's what I'm hoping for. What am I going to do? I'm going to pick against who I'm rooting for here. I'm hoping for it. So, all right. That's going to do it for Chris HOJ-cast number 1. See you guys next time.